Hey everyone, it's Tom Seymour from VHS Massacre Radio. I just wanted to do an update. It's been a while since I've actually talked to everyone. In general, this podcast talks about independent filmmaking and film industry, and typically it is sort of me-centric. I talk about some of the stuff I'm working on, but it usually branches out into larger subjects involving the state of American independent filmmaking and things like that. So a few things have happened. One of the things is that the VHS Massacre Too Bluray is coming out on January 18th. This will be the first time that anyone could actually see the feature film. It was in a festival. It was in the festival circuit for almost 2 years, winning over 20 awards. Point is, it did really well. It even played at Shudder's Mid-May Massacre and Horror Hound Weekend and a bunch of conventions. So the film had massive exposure for what we could do. Tim Kulig, one of my partner, filmmaking partner, and one of my best friends, we basically teamed up and we said, you know what, for VHS Massacre 2, we're going to hit it really hard in the festival circuit. So we both kind of chipped in and did it, and the results have been pretty solid. So I would say that's a lesson that I learned after 20-something years of filmmaking, is that it's unfortunate, but I think the truth is you've got to throw money at the film festival circuit. I mean, I guess I've always known that. I've thrown $1,000 here and there into festivals, but to really make an impact, you want to be entering at least 50 film festivals. And I think we got up to entering about 50. We probably got into, I don't know, 30 maybe, but then there were multiple nominations within that. So we had many nominations and wins, so maybe 10 or 15 nominations, 20 wins. And all of that should equal eyes on the film. We did really well in Canada at Vancouver Horror Show. We won there. We won at Requiem Fear Fest, which is winning at Fear Fest is incredible. We never really felt the effects of it because we were sort of all sheltering in place, but it was a nice thing to keep us sane that we did. So the documentary itself, obviously it talks about the American exploitation film, and obviously exploitation films, that term is an advertising term. So it's marketing exploitation. So it's how you market the film. And these films are just genre films. So anything like that accentuates like monster movies, movies with a lot of guns in it, movies basically martial arts films in the 70s. Black exploitation was a huge thing with all black casts and some black directors. You have trip films, as Joe Bob Briggs said it. There was like an LSD film craze for a little while. Biker films was another thing. So yeah, I mean, it's essentially just looking for an underrepresented niche that Hollywood won't touch, and then you're doing it. And so inherently, those things tend to be edgier and stranger. And so the whole idea of the documentary is that the real experimentation is at the edge of acceptability. So meaning that if you're gonna be experimenting in art, you're gonna get shit on a lot, and it's only a few people that are gonna get through with their ideas that are somehow simultaneously novel, but also basically the average person would accept too, because the studio system is all about sort of appeasing the middle of the row, or it used to be. So that basically the issue is that there's only a handful of media companies now, and especially in the streaming space, there's a handful, and they seem to be sort of like not faltering, but a lot of them are stagnating. Like Netflix is stagnating. From information I've heard, they've actually, so the price of our subscription goes up in the United States, and then what they're doing is discounting subscriptions in India and stuff like that. So they're almost virtually free because people don't give a shit about Netflix in India. And so you have a situation where Disney subscribers are flatlining, and so we're really running up against something, a certain decline of digital media, a decline of digital journalism. A lot of those companies are starting to fall apart. Everything from BuzzFeed to, even Vice, I think, is falling apart. And even some of those networks, like CW networks, are some of their shows will literally draw like 300,000 people on a show premiere, which is like pathetic, because like your favorite YouTuber probably does like 3 million in a day, right? So and those are supposed to be billion-dollar companies, right? So something doesn't add up, right? So something's very strange. So the documentary focuses on a lot of that, but mostly about the aspect of how none of the streaming sites buy low-budget exploitation films anymore. And the reason why I pivoted towards using exploitation, I didn't like using that term because people don't know what it is and they think it's about exploiting, people or labor or something, and it's not. The problem was the term independent film has been totally stolen by the companies. Like Miramax was never really independent. They're a huge multi-million-dollar company. They were Miramax initially, and then they spun off, and then there was the Weinstein Company, and none of those were ever independent. They were considered mini majors, and realistically, mini majors was just a term, but they put out more movies than most of the majors, so it was sort of nonsense. And as we moved through the 90s into 2000s, independent filmmaking became almost unviable because of the decline of physical media, which is what my first documentary talks about. So because independents needed to sell physical media to get their budget back, and that dwindled down, essentially a lot of independent filmmaking fell apart. But also, too, there's been an absolute almost 100% takeover of all forms of profitable media by a handful of companies. It's not conspiracy. You can look it up. There are not that many. I mean, they all look. There's like 1,000 vassals, right? So CW is owned by whatever, CBS, right? And then you can go up the chain from there. And all of these companies have parent owners. And so you're in a situation where it's to do independent film distribution is really tough, and there's not that many people who still do it. And even if you are an independent distributor, you have to use a middle person, a middle company. So Troma is one of the best examples right now, because if you know anything about genre film, anything at all, you know what Troma is, and they have been going for over 40 years. And in addition to that, they actually still put out low-budget films, including my own films, right? The last film they put out, the first VHS Massacre film, the middle person they used was Filmrise. Well, Filmrise is this gigantic distributor, but Troma has to get into the market somehow. So then Filmrise gets the thing on iTunes and Google Play and Xbox and gets it on other places like that. But even that, still there are certain outliers. Like Netflix essentially has closed their doors to the low budget. And when I say low budget, what I really mean is no budget. And that term has shifted a lot. When in the late 90s, when I started, like a low budget film, I considered was like a $250,000 film, which was low budget, but that was a lot of money, because I was making feature-length 16mm films for about $9,000. And so it was that, many considered low budget in that vicinity. But now low budget is like a $5 million film, and no budget is like under $1 million. So you get to this thing where it just becomes bizarre, So it's really, to some degree, closed off in a way that maybe it wasn't in previous decades, because when you had independently owned video stores and independent distributors, what would happen is the indie stores would buy a bunch of the low budget stuff because it was way cheaper, so they could fill up their stores, and then also have some of the A titles, which they couldn't afford too many copies of that. So independent film stores had their own flavor, and it was really interesting in that way. So the good thing is, in 2022, physical media has not gone away, but it's more of a collector's market. And in one sense, it means that you just have to sell higher quality content with in hopes that people respond to it. But this is what happened: is the market there's so much content now that all these conglomerates are desperate for existing titles, because they want the audience to see the title of the film and associate it with something they already know clearly. So they want to see, like, hey, there's a new Indiana Jones. Hey, there's a new Star Wars film, And that would essentially make them click on it. To some degree, it's actually, some of the exploitation titles, like Chainsaw Cheerleaders or something, it's similar in that way, because if you clicked on that, exactly what it was. Like, you shouldn't like click on Chainsaw Cheerleaders, watch it, and say, wow, that was offensive. You should say, no, I clicked on Chainsaw Cheerleaders and that's what I wanted to see. So there's some kind of symmetry to the idea, the way the studios are approaching content now. But it's getting really ridiculous. If you look at like Peacock, it's like, oh my God, network television was free and it was never really that good, except maybe in the 70s, with like, who's the guy? Norman Lear, the producer. But so basically, you have, like, I was looking at Peacock and they're making a MacGruber series. It's like, dear God, like, just reboot MacGyver. So you're making there was an SNL sketch called MacGruber with, was it Seth Meyers, I think? No, not Seth Meyers. Oh God, I forget the guy's name. It's very funny. Will Forte. And so it was a sketch. Somehow they made a movie out of it with Val Kilmer in it. And I watched it, and it was fucking funny. Like, it was actually funny. I liked it. But it was a huge bomb. And then so years later on Peacock, where they're literally rebooting and redoing anything that had any kind of name. You're literally getting a MacGruber series, and something that never was successful. It's just a really bizarre situation. Which brings me back to something. I got to do this Q&A with Joe Bob Briggs and Lloyd Kaufman, Debbie Rochon, and then my buddies Tim and James. And in it, Lloyd essentially said it's. So here's the thing. Troma is making a big budget Toxic Avenger film with Legendary Pictures, with Elijah Woods, Kevin Bacon, Peter Dinklage. It's going to be great. And Joe Bob's opinion on that was that's no surprise at all, because he believes the lifeblood of the studio system is actually independent and exploitation. Those are the people doing all the weird films, taking all the risks, which once anything is successful, the studio system will then steal, or pay for, but mostly steal, and then emulate that. And that's essentially how it works. It's probably how the music industry works. It's probably how the art industry works. And it's something that's a little disappointing. But so VHS Massacre 2 talks a lot about that. I still have some hope for Amazon Prime, even though in 2018 they deleted thousands of no budget films off of their system. I still have hope for them because, unlike Netflix, they will actually typically can put your movie on there. I mean, there's no guarantee they'll keep it. Sometimes they just delete it for preposterous reasons. But so let's look at the trailer to VHS Massacre 2. Blu-ray's out on January 18th. You can get it if you look here. You can get it on Amazon. So that's pretty cool. It's you can get it on Best Buy and a bunch of other places too. So here is the trailer to VHS Massacre 2.
An independent film, of course, has nearly died in terms of there actually being a market for it.
I made a documentary a few years back, and it was about the end of the video store era and the decline of physical media.
The last blockbuster video in the United States.
It opened up a can of worms that I think resonates throughout the history of film. Filmmaking is a freedom of speech issue.
And you have very few people who will buck that system.
The ambition is what matters, that the heart is there.
And films have been censored throughout history in various ways.
That film, which was his first film, destroyed his career.
And controversy is really what makes a movie survive.
There was no streaming service that would even stream us.
They just decided to start pulling content. We're not in control of our destinies, they are.
All the rules that prevent monopoly and encourage competition have gone away.
You should be able to turn a profit.
You did.
Someone stole it.
Somewhere along the 120-year plus history of film, people realized that movies had the ability to sculpt society in a way that was even more potent than the written word, and people have been trying to control it ever since.
Okay, so that was the trailer for VHS Massacre 2. And so I one of the things I did recently is I re-upped my subscription to Troma Now, which is Troma's streaming service. And I will say I grew up watching Troma films. I love Lloyd Kaufman films and the whole legacy of that thing. And when you subscribe to Troma Now, it is kind of amazing because... no offense, it's not the most organized streaming service, although there's nearly 1,000 titles on it, and it's got everything from like Basket Case to Maniac Cop, like to Toxic Avenger. Like it's really like a center for exploitation films. But there's content on there that could never be on any of the mainstream sites, and so I think that's very meaningful, and that matters. And so I know I sound like I'm a sort of a shill here, but I think I think it's $4.99 a month, and so if you subscribe to Troma Now, you can I think you get a month free or something like that, or a week free or something. And the first VHS Massacre is on there if you want to check it out, as well as a short documentary I did with Tim Coolidge called MacLeod, and that's about the king of royalty-free music, Kevin MacLeod. So anyway, Troma Now I think is it's really important. There's a few of these. There's more than a few independent streaming sites, but not that many have a catalog that deep. I think Full Moon has one. There was this thing that MVD teamed up with Rue Morgue to make. I think it was called the Midnight Movie Society. So there's some stuff on there. So it's worth checking that out. The other thing is, let's see if I can bring that up. Let's see. Troma Now. You might hear my daughter in the background. She's being a little baby maniac. So that's Troma Now. A free month, so it's pretty badass. So The other thing I want to talk about is, so basically, I direct and I edit and I do a bunch of stuff. That's kind of the sort of the modern template. I came out of, I had made my first feature, 16mm feature in my early 20s, but I made my first like Super 8 when I was like still in grade school. And so I really liked that kind of filmmaking. But I ended up getting into news, and I did that because I went to Northwestern Connecticut Community College for visual communication. Then I volunteered at public access television, and then from there, that was enough to get me in the door as they called it a vacation relief editor. We'd come in at you'd get up at 3 a.m. to get into work for 4 and edit the overnight news because someone called out sick, and you're getting paid $10 an hour. But at the time in Connecticut in the late 90s, that was really all there was. There was maybe 1 or 2 independent filmmakers that anyone knew. You had the WWF down in Stanford. You had ESPN, and then you had the local news. And those two things, ESPN and WWF, were incredibly difficult to get into. And a lot of people would start at CBS News and then get taken on at ESPN. That happened to my buddy Mike, is that he worked at CBS and then he got into ESPN. And I think I know maybe one person who did something at the WWE, I guess it's called now. So it's tough nut to crack for sure. So at the time, news was the way in. So obviously, I came from this school of learning to shoot to the best of my ability and then learning to edit. My main jobs were in editing. So fast forward to now, and when I finished VHS Massacre 2, I had to export the thing on a 10-year-old iMac, and it took 24 hours to render. And when it went through and it was finished, I said to myself, no matter what I do, I have to get a new computer. I mean, I didn't buy that thing 10 years ago. What I do is I buy used iMacs and usually put extra memory and solid-state drives and stuff like that. But I was like, I really need a new computer. So a few things were happening. With the big-budget version of Toxic Avenger by Legendary Pictures coming out, I thought, man, I would love to get another interview with Lloyd Kaufman. And so it was cool. I got to do an interview with him, and he invited me over to his house, and it was really incredible. I had to borrow a Blackmagic camera, and I have a cinema lens, and so I did the interview that way. And basically, I was like, man, I could really use a new camera as well. The Blackmagic 4K pockets are amazing. And what had ended up happening is Tim, who's like my best friend, just up and bought me a camera body, and he's like, you know what, can call it an investment towards the next film, because we work on the films together, but it was an absolute amazing Christmas gift. So I found myself with a Blackmagic 4K pocket and a pretty good cinema lens, and then my computer was so old, I really didn't want to spend it would have been almost $3,000 to buy an iMac of the power that I would need, So I looked into the Mac Minis. My friend James Richardson, who was in the docs, he said, check out the Mac Minis. I checked them out. So for $1,200, you could sign up for this thing to do payments. So it was like $100 a month payment. And so I bought this iMac Mini it's like a terabyte of hard drive and then 16 gigs of unified RAM, which apparently is incredibly fast, and it is shared between the graphics card. But there's basically the benchmark on the thing is as if you had a computer with 32 gigs of RAM, with with the, what is it? HHD hard drives. Is it HD? HDD? Anyway, so I had that, and then my wife is awesome, and she bought me a monitor for Christmas. So, and because I had all the other peripherals, so basically I found myself with a new camera and a new computer setup, which was refreshing. Though I have been feeling just utterly sort of overwhelmed and exhausted, and by the pandemic and working and basically Steph and I are raising our daughter Isabella, who's 2.5, and which is wonderful, but it's a large combination of things happening. So it's been a little difficult to pull out of the anxiety and to be constructive and work. And so, but I did conduct 2 interviews, one with Tim, one with Lloyd. I had a third one that should happen soon, but I plan to build another documentary very slowly. It will focus on a lot of the stuff I've been ranting about, which is now a center for focus is probably the decline or the last stand of the American independent film distribution company, because there's so little meat on the bone that most of those guys are going under. I know a handful at this point. I know that there's some guys in Texas, there's some West Coast guys. On the East Coast, you got Trauma, you got SRS, but the problem is when you start talking about companies like Arrow and Scream Factory, like they primarily, if not 100%, they remaster old films. And that's great, but that doesn't push our motive forward to have independent film thrive. And you still have, when I'm talking about independent film, I'm mostly talking about feature-length documentaries and feature-length narratives. Now, YouTube is I have a long history with YouTube, working at Black 20 and, millions and millions of views and all that stuff. So I'm not naive to it. When I was at that company, we even got like a YouTube and an Emmy nomination for a few of the series we worked on. And so, but premiering a feature-length film or documentary purely on YouTube might not be, it's probably not the best idea. Frankly, you might be better off doing the paywall on YouTube and then trying to promote by other means. Yeah, so anyway, so the next documentary may concentrate on that. Who's left? Talk to those companies, try to get some interviews, but not a lot of them. Look, there are probably still a ton of what you would call independent film production companies. But as to distribution companies that are truly independent, meaning they'll take a low-budget film and they will distribute it through their own means, and then also to get them on the larger platforms as well. That is rarer, and it's almost like a specialty thing at this point. MVD is another company that does really well with that. So I think there's a rich subject there. And the last thing I want to talk about is, well, actually, before I forget, I watched Mutant Blast on Trauma Now. It's this Portuguese film that Trauma, I think, helped produce, and it is hilarious. It's like it's ridiculous. It's gross. It's at times somehow moving. It's off the wall. It's great. I mean, the plot is pretty simple. There is this genetically altered human being, and this army of people try to spring this person free, and because their DNA is really valuable because they're like a superhuman. And then basically there's a security breach, and then a nuclear bomb goes off, and all these people get mutated in very hilarious ways. and then it's just a group of people trying to find their way to a safe zone. And but it's done through hilarious means. There's some really great performances by the whole cast. So anyway, that director's, tops off to you, and great job. I thought that movie is fantastic. And I think you can get that on. I think you can get that on Blu-ray and then Troma Now. The last thing I want to talk about is I did a film called Mark of the Beast. The first VHS Massacre talked about it a little bit. And that film really didn't... The film accomplished a few things, right? It won the highest award at Houston Film Festival. It won... it got a 2-page article in Fangoria. A few other things. And we were really proud of it. But when we put it on streaming, the film was designed to look like an older horror film from the 70s. So it had added grain, and it had, very carefully had this sort of tobacco hue, color grade over everything. And there was natural grain in the film, and then there was added grain. And a lot of people thought it was very beautiful, but in streaming, people just didn't want to see that stuff. I would say about 10 years ago, for some reason, grain became unfashionable. Grain became ugly. And I think it has to do... I think there's a corporate element to it, with wanting a clean streaming image and the type of compression you would use and streaming it in your home, and not wanting to see grain, associating grain with bad clarity or bad streaming. And so in result... I think on Prime, I think it actually, there were some complaints about it, and other streaming formats, So, but I don't think it ever really got the chance that it could have. We had to put it on DVD and not Blu-ray. That really destroyed the color space that we created very carefully. And so I've been really thinking about it. I finally located the original files. And I'm going to make a new movie out of it, essentially. I'm probably going to make it black and white, anamorphic. I'm probably going to degrain it so people don't complain about it on streaming. Tim Cooley is going to rescore it with his music, and I'm going to basically change the edit entirely. So it's going to be essentially a new film. This is something that's more common in the European market, to put out 2 different versions of a film. But I think I'm going to retitle it The Exorcism of Fleet Marish. I've been talking with John Gorman, who I work with. I've been talking about Tim Cooley about the music and stuff like that. And we really think we need to give it another chance, and to let people see it in a different way. And so I'm going to because I have this new iMac, and I have the latest DaVinci Resolve 17 Studio, which came with the camera that Tim got me. I'm going to spend probably the next 6 months recreating this film, and we'll see what we can do with it. But that's about it for now. Thanks for listening to me rant. So check out Troma Now. You could pick up VHS Massacre 2 on Blu-ray. It is you can get it Dawn of the Discs. You can get it at Troma Direct. You can get it at Best Buy, Target, and then of course Amazon. So anyway, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.